The gunshot echoed across the canyon and died in the wind. Jacob Thornfield lowered the rifle, watching the buck stumble and fall. Clean shot. Through the shoulder, straight to the heart. The animal went down fast, which was a mercy. Out here in the high country of northern Arizona, mercy was the best you could hope for. He was halfway to the kill when he heard the growl. 5 gray wolves emerged from the tree line, moving low and slow, their eyes locked on the fresh meat steaming in the snow. The alpha, a massive male with a scarred muzzle, stepped forward. Its lips pulled back. Teeth like knives caught the winter light. Jake stopped walking. His rifle was empty. 1 shot left in the cylinder of his revolver. 5 wolves. The math was simple. He was going to lose. "Back," he said. His voice was steady, but not loud enough to carry over the wind. The wolves didn't move. They spread out in a semicircle, cutting off his retreat. The alpha growled again, deeper this time. A warning or a promise. Jake took a step backward. His boot heel hit ice. The world tilted. Behind him was the drop he'd forgotten about, the ravine that cut through this part of the mountain like a scar, 20 feet deep in places, 40 in others, filled with snow that looked soft but would break your back just the same. He tried to catch himself. His arms wheeled. His weight shifted too far. The edge crumbled beneath him. Jake fell. The sky flipped. The ground rushed up. He hit the slope and tumbled, the rifle flying from his hands. Snow filled his mouth, his nose, his eyes. The world became white and cold and spinning. He slammed into something hard, a rock, a tree. He couldn't tell. The air punched out of his lungs. Then he stopped. For a long moment Jake lay still. His left arm screamed with pain. Dislocated shoulder maybe, or broken. He couldn't tell yet. His ribs ached. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. Above him he heard the wolves, their snarls and yips as they tore into the deer. They'd gotten what they wanted. They'd leave him alone now. Small mercies. Jake closed his eyes. He needed to move, needed to climb out before the cold settled into his bones and made the choice for him. But his body wouldn't listen, not yet. That's when he heard it, breathing. Not his own, softer, weaker, coming from somewhere close. Jake opened his eyes, turned his head. Through the snow and the gray light, he saw a shape. Human. Huddled against the base of the ravine wall. A youth. Jake forgot about his arm. He rolled onto his knees, biting back a grunt of pain, and crawled through the snow. The shape became clearer. A young man. 15, maybe 16 years old. Apache from the look of him. He wore buckskin that was torn and thin. No coat, no blanket. His lips were blue. His fingers were curled into stiff claws. Ice crystals clung to his eyelashes. The boy wasn't moving. Jake pressed 2 fingers to the youth's neck. Waited. There. A pulse. Faint and slow, but there. "Hey," Jake said. He shook the boy's shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" "Nothing." Jake looked around. No tracks. No sign of a camp or a fire. Just the boy, alone in the snow, freezing to death. He didn't ask himself why. He didn't wonder who left him here or how long he'd been down in this hole. Those were questions for later. Right now, there was only one thing that mattered. Jake shrugged out of his coat. The cold hit him like a fist, but he ignored it. He wrapped the heavy canvas around the boy's lean frame and helped him sit up. The youth was light, weakened by cold and hunger, mostly bone. The climb out was harder than the fall. Jake's left arm was useless. He had to pull himself up one-handed, helping the boy along with him, wedging his boots into cracks in the rock and hauling them both higher. The youth tried to help, gripping rocks with numb fingers. His fingers went numb. His legs shook. Twice they almost slipped, but they didn't. They made it to the top, rolled over the edge, and lay gasping in the snow. The wolves were gone. The deer was a red stain in the white. The wind howled. Jake's horse, a gray gelding named Flint, stood where he'd left him, tied to a pine tree. The animal snorted as Jake approached, half carrying the youth. "I know," Jake muttered. "I'm crazy." He managed to get into the saddle. The boy slumped against his chest. The ride back to the ranch was 15 miles. It took 2 hours. By the time Jake saw the cabin, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the reins. He slid off the horse and helped the youth down, half-carried him toward the door, kicked it open. The inside of the cabin was cold, but not as cold as outside. The stove had gone out while he was gone. Jake laid the boy on the narrow bed in the corner and went to work. First, the fire. He built it fast, stuffing the stove with kindling and dry cedar. The flames caught and roared. Heat began to fill the small room. Next, the boy. Jake pulled off the frozen buckskin and checked for frostbite. The fingers were bad, the toes worse, but nothing black yet, nothing dead. He filled a basin with lukewarm water and soaked the boy's hands and feet, rubbing gently to bring the blood back. The youth didn't wake. Jake wrapped him in every blanket he owned, laid him close to the stove, tipped a little warm broth into his mouth, just a few drops at a time. The boy swallowed. That was good. That meant his body was still fighting. Jake sat down in the chair by the bed. His shoulder throbbed. His ribs ached. He was still wet from the snow, and his own clothes were starting to freeze on his skin, but he didn't move. He just watched the boy's chest rise and fall. It reminded him of another time, another loss. 6 years ago, a bedroom that smelled like sickness and blood. His wife Eliza, pale and weak in the bed, the midwife shaking her head. The baby, a boy, blue and silent in her arms. Jake had held that child for 10 minutes, begging him to breathe. But he never did. Eliza died 3 hours later. Jake pushed the memory away. It didn't help. It never did. He stood up, peeled off his wet shirt, and found a dry one, checked his shoulder, dislocated like he'd thought. He braced himself against the wall and popped it back into place with a grunt and a curse. The pain made his vision white for a second, but it faded. He ate a cold biscuit, drank some water, sat back down in the chair. The boy slept through the night. Jake didn't. When the sun came up pale and cold through the window, the boy's eyes opened. They were dark and wide and full of fear. He looked at Jake, looked at the cabin, looked at the stove. Then he spoke. One word. Apache. Ina. Mother. Jake didn't know the language, but he understood the tone. Desperation. Loss. I don't know where she is, Jake said quietly, but you're safe here. The boy stared at him. Then his eyes closed again. Jake let him sleep. The second day was the same as the first. The boy woke for a few minutes at a time, drank a little water, ate a little broth. But he didn't speak again, didn't ask questions, just watched Jake with those dark, wary eyes. Jake didn't push. He kept the fire going, kept the cabin warm, changed the bandages on the boy's hands and feet. The frostbite was healing, slowly but healing. On the third morning, Jake heard hoofbeats. He stood up from the table, walked to the window, and looked out. 3 riders, coming up the trail from the south, moving slow. Jake's hand went to the rifle by the door. He checked the load. Full. He set it within reach and waited. The riders stopped 50 feet from the cabin. They didn't dismount. They just sat there on their horses, still and silent. All 3 were women, Apache women. One was young, maybe in her late 20s. She sat straight in the saddle, her long dark hair braided and hanging over one shoulder. She wore a deerskin dress and a wool blanket around her shoulders. Her face was hard and tired and beautiful. The second woman was older. Her hair was loose and tangled. Her eyes were empty. She swayed slightly in the saddle like she was barely holding on. The third woman was somewhere in between, alert, watching. Her hand rested on a knife at her belt. The young woman spoke first. Her voice was clear and steady. "We mean no harm," she said in English. "We're looking for a boy. His name is Kai." Jake didn't move. "How do I know you won't hurt him?" The young woman's jaw tightened. "Because we've been searching for 3 days without food or sleep. If we meant him harm, we wouldn't be here." Jake looked at the older woman. She was crying. No sound, just tears running down her face. Her hands gripped the reins so tightly, her knuckles were white. The young woman followed his gaze. "That's his mother," she said. "She can't speak anymore. Not since his father died. Jake felt something twist in his chest. He looked back at the young woman. "What's your name?" "Nashota," she said, "but most call me Asha." Jake nodded slowly. He stepped away from the door, picked up the rifle, held it loose at his side. "Come inside," he said, "but I keep the rifle." Asha dismounted, helped the older woman down. The third woman followed her eyes, never leaving Jake. They walked into the cabin. The moment Dakota saw Kai, she made a sound like a wounded animal. She dropped to her knees beside the bed and gathered the youth into her arms. Kai woke, saw her, and started to cry. Not loud, just quiet, broken sobs. Dakota held him and rocked him and said nothing. Asha stood near the door. Her face didn't change, but her hands shook. The third woman, Sarah, stayed by the wall, watching. Jake set the rifle on the table. "He's going to be all right," he said. "Frostbite on his hands and feet, but nothing permanent." Asha looked at him. "Thank you." Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He filled tin cups with water and set them on the table. Then he brought out what little food he had: jerky, hard bread, a few dried beans. "Eat," he said. The women didn't move at first. Then Asha reached out, took a piece of bread, broke it in half, and gave one piece to Sarah. She ate the other half slowly, like she was trying to remember how. Sarah ate without looking away from Jake. Dakota didn't eat. She just held Kai. After a long silence, Asha spoke. "We need to leave." Jake looked at her. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," she said. "Somewhere they won't find us." "Who's looking for you?" As Asha hesitated. "People who think we did something wrong." "Did you?" "No." Jake believed her. He didn't know why, but he did. He walked to the window and looked out. The sky was gray. The wind was picking up. He could smell the storm coming. "There's a blizzard moving in," he said. "Big one. It'll be here by tonight. You won't make it 5 miles in that." Asha stood up. "We'll take our chances." "You'll die." "Maybe." Jake turned to face her. "The boy just started healing. You want to drag him back out into the cold?" Asha's jaw clenched. She looked at Kai, looked at Dakota, looked at Sarah. "What do you suggest?" she asked. "Stay," Jake said, "until the storm passes. Then we'll talk." Sarah stepped forward. "We don't trust white men." Jake met her eyes. "I don't trust anyone, but I'm not letting a child and 3 women die in a blizzard." Asha studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, we stay, but only until the storm passes." "Fair enough." That night, Jake set up sleeping arrangements. Dakota and Kai took the bed. Asha and Sarah took the space near the stove wrapped in blankets. Jake took the chair. He didn't sleep. He sat in the dark listening to the wind hammer the walls and the fire crackle in the stove. He could hear Dakota's breathing, slow and uneven. Could hear Kai's deeper breaths, the breathing of a youth, not a child. Could hear Asha shifting on the floor, unable to find comfort. Around midnight, Asha sat up. She looked at Jake. Their eyes met. "Can't sleep?" she asked quietly. "Haven't slept well in 6 years." "What happened 6 years ago?" Jake looked at the fire. "My wife died, and our son. Childbirth." Asha was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry." "Me too." She stood up and walked closer. In the firelight, Jake could see her more clearly, the sharp lines of her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hand rested on her stomach. She was pregnant. Jake's gaze flicked down, then back up. Asha noticed. "Yes," she said, "I'm with child." "The father," her face went hard. "Not something I want to discuss." Jake nodded. "All right." She sat down on the floor near his chair. Not close, but not far either. "You didn't have to help us," she said. "I know." "So why did you—" Jake was quiet for a long time. "Because walking away would have felt like pulling a trigger," he said finally. Asha looked at him, really looked at him, like she was trying to see past the words. "You carry guilt," she said. "Everyone does." "Not like you." Jake didn't argue. She was right. They sat in silence until the fire burned low. Then Asha went back to her blankets. Jake stayed in the chair. The storm hit just before dawn. The blizzard lasted 7 days. Snow piled against the cabin walls until the windows were half buried. The wind screamed like something alive. The temperature dropped so low that water left in a cup overnight would freeze solid. Inside, the five of them learned to live together. Jake kept the stove burning. It took all the firewood he'd stockpiled for the month, but he didn't care. Freezing wasn't an option. Asha cooked. She knew how to use a cast-iron skillet and a Dutch oven better than Jake expected. She made thin stews from beans and salt pork, made hard bread softer by soaking it in broth. She didn't waste anything. Sarah watched, always watching. Her hand never strayed far from the knife on her belt. She didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then her answers were short. But she worked. She hauled water from the pump, mended torn clothes, kept the floors swept. Dakota stayed close to Kai. She held his hand when he walked, whispered to him in Apache, but she still didn't speak to anyone else. Her eyes were far away, like she was seeing something no one else could see. Kai healed quickly. Youth always did. By the third day, he was walking without help. By the fifth, he was exploring the cabin. He found Jake's old books on the shelf, pulled them down, and looked at the pictures. He couldn't read English well yet, but he liked the drawings. Jake watched him one afternoon. The youth was sitting by the fire turning the pages of a medical journal, looking at diagrams of bones and muscles. "You like that one?" Jake asked. Kai looked up. He didn't answer, but he nodded. Jake walked over and sat down beside him. He pointed to a picture of a hand. "Hand," he said. Kai repeated the word carefully. His English was better than a 6-year-old's would be. "Hand." Jake pointed to another picture. "Arm. Arm." They went through 10 words like that. Kai learned fast. He remembered everything. Asha watched from the stove. When Jake looked up, she smiled. Just a little, just enough. On the fourth night, something changed. Jake was sitting at the table filing down a rough edge on a piece of wood he was using to fix a broken latch. Asha was across from him, sewing a tear in Sarah's sleeve. The fire crackled. The wind howled. "You have books," Asha said. "Not many ranchers do." Jake didn't look up. "My wife was a teacher. Before we came out here. She taught you to read." "No, I learned in the army, but she taught me to love it." Asha's needle paused. "You were a soldier." "Scout," Jake corrected. "Different job." "But you fought." "Yes. Against my people." Jake set down the file, met her eyes. "Yes." Asha didn't look angry, just tired. "What did you see? Too much." "That's not an answer." Jake leaned back in his chair. "I saw men do terrible things, on both sides. I saw families destroyed, children left alone, land burned. I saw people die for reasons that stopped making sense halfway through." "Do you regret it?" "Every day." Asha went back to sewing. They didn't speak again that night, but the next night, Asha brought one of the books to the table, Paradise Lost. She opened it to a marked page and read aloud. Her voice was soft and clear. The words were heavy. They were about loss and exile and trying to find a place in a world that didn't want you. Jake listened. He didn't say anything, but when she finished, he nodded. "That's a hard one," he said. "All the good ones are." On the 6th night, Dakota screamed. It was 3 in the morning. Everyone was asleep. Then Dakota sat up in the bed, eyes wide, mouth open, and screamed like she was dying. Jake was on his feet before he was fully awake. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. Dakota was shaking. Her hands clutched at the blankets. Her eyes were seeing something that wasn't there. "It's all right," Jake said quietly. "You're safe." Dakota didn't hear him. She screamed again. Kai woke up. Asha rushed over and put a hand on the youth's shoulder. Sarah stood by the wall, tense and ready. Jake reached out slowly and touched Dakota's shoulder. "You're safe," he said again. "No one's going to hurt you." Dakota's eyes focused. She saw Jake, saw the cabin, saw Kai sitting up in bed, and then she spoke. "Maka." The word was broken, raw, like it had been buried for years and finally clawed its way out. Asha froze. "Sister," Dakota looked at her. Tears streamed down her face. "I saw him die." Asha moved to the bed. She took Dakota's hands. "You haven't spoken in so long." "I couldn't," Dakota whispered. "Every time I tried, I saw him. The blood, the soldiers. I couldn't." "But you can now." Dakota looked at Jake. Her eyes were red and raw. "He was there." Jake's blood went cold. Asha turned to him. "What is she talking about?" Dakota's voice shook. "Canyon de Chelly, 1866. I watched my husband die. A soldier tried to save him, pulled him behind a rock, started bandaging the wound, but then the other soldiers called him back. They were retreating. He had to choose." Jake couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "He looked at Maka," Dakota continued, "looked at him like he wanted to stay. But his commander was yelling. They would leave him behind if he didn't come, so he left. He left Maka there. And Maka bled out alone." Asha stood up slowly. Her face was pale. "Jake?" Jake didn't answer. "Were you at Canyon de Chelly?" Asha asked. He nodded. "Did you try to save an Apache warrior?" Another nod. "And did you leave him to die?" Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "I had to choose. If I stayed, I'd be court-martialed, or killed by the Confederates we were chasing. I thought someone else would help him. I thought he'd live. I was wrong." The cabin was silent. Dakota stared at him. Asha stared at him. Sarah's hand was on her knife. "You let him die," Asha said. "I tried to save him. But you left." "Yes." Asha's hands clenched into fists. "You chose your life over his." "I chose wrong," Jake said. "I've lived with that for 16 years. You think I don't see his face every night? Then why didn't you tell us? Would you have stayed if you knew?" Asha opened her mouth, closed it. No answer. Dakota stood up. She was shaking. She walked toward Jake. For a moment he thought she was going to hit him, or spit on him, or scream. Instead she placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "You tried to save him," she said quietly. "I saw you. You were crying while you bandaged him. You didn't want to leave." Jake's throat tightened. "My husband was not a brave man," Dakota continued. "He ran from fights. He hid when the soldiers came. He would have done the same thing you did. He would have chosen life. I can't hate you for making the choice he would have made." She stepped back. "But I can't forgive you either," she said. "Not yet." Then she turned and walked back to the bed, lay down beside Kai, closed her eyes. Asha was still staring at Jake. Her face was unreadable. "I need air," she said. She walked to the door, pulled on Jake's coat, and stepped outside into the storm. Jake followed. The cold hit him like a wall. The wind tore at his clothes. Snow blinded him. But he could see Asha standing 20 feet away, arms wrapped around herself. "You don't get to run from this," she said without turning around. "I'm not running. I'm giving you space." She spun to face him. "I don't want space. I want answers. Why did you save Kai? You owe us nothing." "Because I couldn't save my son," Jake said. "Or your brother-in-law. But I could save that boy." Asha's face crumpled. She started to cry. Not soft tears, hard, wrenching sobs. "You don't understand," she said. "Everyone I touch dies or suffers." "What do you mean?" She looked at him with red eyes. "Do you want to know why I'm pregnant? Do you want to know who the father is?" Jake waited. "Sergeant Lucas Brennan, Fort Apache, 6 months ago, spring of 1882. I was working as a translator. He cornered me in the supply room, held a knife to my throat, and he took what he wanted." Jake felt something break inside him. "I'm carrying his child," Asha continued. "A child I didn't ask for. A child I don't want. A child my people want to kill because it's half white. I ran because if I stayed, they'd murder it. And me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I hate this baby," she said. "Every time it moves, I feel sick. Every time I think about it, I want to scream. But I can't get rid of it. And I can't love it. So what am I supposed to do?" Jake stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "It's not your fault," he said. "None of this is. How can you say that? You don't even know me." "I know enough." He reached out and pulled her into his arms. She fought for a second. Then she collapsed against him and sobbed into his chest. They stood like that in the storm, two broken people holding each other up. When they finally went back inside, Sarah was waiting by the door. She looked at Asha's tear-stained face, looked at Jake. "If you hurt her," Sarah said quietly, "I'll kill you." "I know," Jake said. Before dawn, Kai slipped out of bed. He padded across the floor while everyone else was still sleeping. He was observant, curious. He found the old trunk under Jake's bed. It wasn't locked, just latched. Kai opened it carefully, trying not to make noise. Inside were folded clothes, a few letters, a worn Bible, and a leather journal. Kai pulled out the journal, opened it. The words were in English. He could read some of it now, but there were also drawings, sketches of places, of people, of battles. And then he found it, a drawing of a man, Apache, lying on the ground, blood on his chest. Another man kneeling beside him, wrapping bandages around the wound. The kneeling man's face was turned away, but Kai could see his hands, the same hands that had pulled him out of the snow. Kai looked closer at the wounded man, at the necklace around his neck, a bone carving of a hawk. Kai knew that necklace. He'd seen it in the box his mother kept hidden under her blankets. The box she cried over when she thought no one was watching. This was his father. Jake had tried to save him, but Jake had also left him. Kai closed the journal carefully. He looked at Jake asleep in the chair, looked at his mother curled up near Asha, looked at the journal in his hands. He didn't know what to feel, so he hid the journal under his blanket. He'd think about it later. But as he lay there pretending to sleep, one thought kept circling in his mind. If Jake tried to save his father, why did his father die? And if Jake felt so guilty, why did it take 16 years for him to try to make it right? Kai didn't have answers, but he was starting to have questions. Outside, the storm began to ease. The wind died down. The snow stopped falling. By noon, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in a week. The world was white and silent and new. Asha stood by the window looking out. "The storm's over," she said. Jake nodded. "It is. So we should go." "You could." "But—" Jake met her eyes. "But I think you should stay." "Why?" "Because leaving now won't solve anything. Garrett's still out there, Brennan's still out there, and winter's just getting started. You need a place to heal, to rest, to figure out what comes next." Asha looked at Dakota, at Kai, at Sarah. "What do you think?" she asked them. Sarah shrugged. "I think he's right, but I don't have to like it." Dakota spoke softly. "I think my son is safe here, for now." Kai said nothing. He just watched Jake with those dark, thoughtful eyes. Asha turned back to Jake. "If we stay, we pull our weight. We're not charity. Fair enough? And if trouble comes, you let us fight. I wouldn't dream of stopping you." Asha held out her hand. Jake shook it. "Then we stay," she said. "Until spring." Jake nodded. Until spring. But both of them knew it was a lie. Spring was a long way off, and a lot could happen before then. 3 more days passed. The snow kept falling. Not the violent blizzard that had trapped them before, but steady and relentless. The kind of snow that buried everything slowly. That made the world smaller. That forced people to live in close quarters, whether they wanted to or not. Inside the cabin they found a rhythm. Jake woke first always, before dawn. He'd build up the fire, put coffee on to boil, and step outside to check on Flint and break the ice in the water trough. The cold didn't bother him anymore. He'd learned to live with it the same way he'd learned to live with guilt, as a constant companion. By the time he came back inside, Asha would be up. She'd take over the cooking without a word. She was efficient, careful. She made meals stretch further than Jake thought possible. A handful of beans became soup for 5. Stale bread became something almost worth eating. Sarah helped with the heavy work, hauling wood, pumping water. She still didn't talk much, but she'd stopped watching Jake, like he was about to attack. That was progress. Dakota spent most of her time with Kai, teaching him things in Apache, braiding grass into small figures, humming songs that had no words. But she also watched Jake, not with suspicion, with something else. Curiosity maybe, or recognition. And Kai. Kai was everywhere, asking questions in increasingly fluent English, picking up tools and trying to figure out how they worked, following Jake around like a shadow. One afternoon, Jake was repairing a broken chair leg. Kai sat on the floor beside him, watching. "Why you fix?" Kai asked. Jake looked at him. The youth's English was getting better every day. "Because it's broken," Jake said. "Why not new chair?" "Can't afford a new chair, and this one's still good, just needs some work." Kai thought about that. "Like people." Jake stopped working, met the boy's eyes. "Yeah, like people." Kai nodded. He picked up a small piece of wood and turned it over in his hands. "You fix people. I try. You fix me. You weren't broken. You were just cold." "My mother broken." Jake set down his tools. "Your mother's been through a lot, but she's strong. She's not broken. Just hurt." "Can you fix hurt?" Jake didn't have an answer for that. That evening, after supper, Asha pulled one of Jake's books from the shelf. The same one she'd read from before. She sat at the table and opened it. "Do you mind?" she asked. "No." She read aloud. Her voice filled the cabin. The words were about exile, about trying to find purpose after everything you knew was gone, about whether redemption was even possible. Jake listened. So did Dakota. Even Sarah stopped mending and paid attention. When Asha finished the passage, she closed the book. "Your wife had good taste," she said. "She did." "Did she like living out here?" Jake shook his head. "She hated it, the isolation, the cold, the constant work. But she did it anyway." "Why, because I asked her to." Asha looked at him for a long moment. "That must have been hard for her." "It was." "Do you regret it?" Jake was quiet. "Every day." Asha nodded. She understood regret. The fourth night brought the nightmare. It was past midnight. Everyone was asleep except Jake, who sat in his chair by the fire. He couldn't sleep, hadn't been able to for years. So he just sat and watched the flames and tried not to think too much. Then Dakota screamed. The sound ripped through the cabin like a blade. Jake was on his feet instantly. He crossed the room and dropped to his knees beside the bed. Dakota was sitting up, eyes wide, mouth open, screaming like her soul was being torn out. Her hands clawed at the blankets. Her whole body shook. Kai woke up. Asha grabbed him and held him close. Sarah was against the wall knife, already in her hand. Jake reached out slowly. "Dakota, it's all right. You're safe." She didn't hear him. She screamed again. Jake touched her shoulder gently. "You're in the cabin. You're with Kai. You're safe." Dakota's eyes focused. She saw Jake, saw the cabin, saw Kai in Asha's arms. And then she spoke. Her voice was rough, unused, like something rusty finally breaking free. "Maka," she whispered. Asha's eyes went wide. "Sister." "You spoke." Dakota's face crumpled. Tears poured down her cheeks. "I saw him die. I see it every night, over and over." Asha set Kai down and moved to the bed. She took Dakota's hands. "You haven't spoken since it happened." "I couldn't." Dakota's voice broke. "Every time I tried, the words got stuck. All I could see was the blood, the soldiers, his face." "But you can speak now." Dakota looked at Jake. Her eyes were raw. "Because he's here." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Asha asked. Dakota's hands trembled. "Canyon de Chelly, 1866. I was hiding in the rocks with the other women and children. The soldiers came through, chasing the warriors. There was shooting, screaming. Maka was hit. He went down." Her voice steadied, like she'd been waiting 16 years to tell this story. "I watched a soldier run to him, a young man. He pulled Maka behind a boulder, started wrapping his wound. He was crying while he did it. I remember that. He was crying." Jake closed his eyes. "Then the other soldiers started pulling back," Dakota continued. An officer was yelling, ordering everyone to retreat. The young soldier looked at Maka, looked at the others leaving. He didn't want to go. I could see it on his face. "What happened?" Asha asked quietly. The officer yelled his name. "Morrison," he said. "Morrison, we're pulling out. If you don't come now, you stay forever." Jake's real name, the one he'd left behind when he came west. The soldier looked at Maka one more time, Dakota said. "Then he ran. He left my husband there, bleeding, alone. Maka died an hour later. I held him while he went." The cabin was silent except for the fire crackling. Asha turned to Jake. Her face was pale. "Morrison, that's you?" It wasn't a question. Jake nodded. "You were at Canyon de Chelly?" "Yes." "You tried to save her husband?" "Yes." "And you left him to die?" Jake's voice came out hoarse. "I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Sarah said from the wall. Jake looked at her. "You're right. I chose to live. I chose to follow orders. I chose wrong." Asha stood up, her fists clenched. "You've been here all this time. You saved Kai. You let us stay. And you never said anything. Would you have stayed if you knew?" "That's not the point." "Yes, it is." Jake's voice rose. "If I'd told you, you would have left. Kai would have died in the cold. Dakota would still be silent. You'd all be dead or hunted. So yes, I kept quiet. Because keeping you alive mattered more than clearing my conscience." Asha's eyes blazed. "You don't get to decide that." "Someone had to." "Why didn't you stay with him?" The question came from Dakota. Her voice was soft but steady. Jake turned to her. "Because I was young and scared. Because my commanding officer was a bastard who would have left me behind without a second thought. Because I thought someone else would help him. Because I didn't want to die." "All of those are true," Dakota said. "But which one is the real reason?" Jake swallowed hard. "The last one. I didn't want to die." Dakota stood up. She walked toward him slowly. Sarah tensed hand on her knife. But Dakota just stopped in front of Jake and looked up at his face. She was shorter than he was, thinner. Her hair was graying at the temples, but her eyes were clear and sharp. "My husband was not a brave man," she said. "He ran from fights. He hid when danger came. The other warriors mocked him, called him weak. But he was kind. He was gentle. And when he died, I think he understood." Jake's throat tightened. "He would have done the same thing you did," Dakota continued. "If the positions were reversed, if he'd been the one with the choice, he would have chosen to live. I know this because I knew him." She reached up and placed her hand on Jake's chest, over his heart. "You carry his death like a stone," she said. "I can feel it. It's been crushing you for 16 years, but he wouldn't want that. He'd want you to let go. I can't. You have to, because my son needs a father, and my sister needs someone who isn't broken by the past." She stepped back. "I forgive you," she said. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to hate will kill me the same way it's killing you." Jake couldn't speak. Dakota walked back to the bed, lay down beside Kai, closed her eyes. Asha was still standing, still staring at Jake. Her face was unreadable. "I need air," she said. She grabbed Jake's coat and walked out into the snow. Jake followed without thinking. The cold hit him like a fist. The snow was falling harder now. The wind cut through his shirt. But he could see Asha standing 20 feet from the cabin, arms wrapped around herself. "You don't get to run from this," she said without turning around. "I'm not running." "Then what are you doing? Giving you space to be angry." Asha spun around. Her eyes were wet. "I don't want space. I want to know why you saved Kai, why you let us stay, why you've done any of this." Jake took a step closer. "Because I couldn't save my son, or your brother-in-law, but I could save that boy. And maybe if I did it would mean something. Maybe it would balance the scales somehow. That's not how it works. I know. But it's all I have." Asha's face crumpled. She started to cry, not quietly, hard, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. "You don't understand," she choked out. "Everyone I touch dies or suffers. My parents, my sister's husband, my people turned on me. And now I'm carrying a child I never wanted from a man who destroyed me. She looked at Jake with desperate eyes. "Do you want to know the truth?" she asked. "Do you want to know why I'm really out here?" Jake waited. "Sergeant Lucas Brennan," she said. "Fort Apache, 1881. I was translating a meeting between the Apache leaders and the Army. Afterwards, I stayed to clean up. Brennan stayed too. He locked the door, put a knife to my throat, and he took what he wanted." Jake felt rage flood through him, hot and sharp. "I tried to fight," Asha continued, "but he was stronger. When it was over, he told me if I said anything, he'd make sure my whole family was arrested for treason, so I said nothing. I went home. I tried to forget." Her hand moved to her stomach. "3 months later, I realized I was pregnant. When my people found out, they wanted to kill the baby, said it was tainted blood. So I ran. I took Dakota and Kai and Sarah. We've been running ever since." Tears streamed down her face. "I hate this child," she whispered. "I feel it move inside me, and I want to scream. I look at my belly and I see his face, his hands. I know it's wrong. I know the baby didn't choose this, but I can't stop feeling it." Jake stepped forward, slowly, like approaching something fragile. "It's not your fault," he said. "How can you say that you don't know me? I know enough. I know you're strong enough to keep running when most people would have given up. I know you love your sister and that boy enough to risk your life for them. I know you read Milton in a language that isn't yours and still understand every word." He was close enough now to see the tears on her cheeks, the exhaustion in her eyes, the pain she'd been carrying alone. "I know you're scared," he said softly, "and I know you're hurting, and I know none of this is fair, but you're not alone anymore. And that child, whatever you feel about it now, it's not responsible for what happened to you." Asha's voice broke. "How am I supposed to love it?" "You don't have to. Not right now. You just have to let it live. The love might come later, or it might not. But that's a problem for another day." Asha collapsed against him. Jake caught her and held on. She sobbed into his chest, while the snow fell around them. Her whole body shook. Jake just held her. He didn't say anything else, didn't make promises he couldn't keep, just stood there in the cold and let her break. When the tears finally slowed, Asha pulled back. Her face was red and swollen, but her eyes were clearer. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not looking away." They stood there for another moment. Then they walked back inside together. Sarah was waiting by the door. She looked at Asha's face, looked at Jake. "If you hurt her," Sarah said quietly, "I'll kill you slowly." "I believe you," Jake said. The next morning before dawn, Kai slipped out of bed. He lay there for a while, listening to the adults breathe. Then he padded across the floor. He'd been thinking about the journal, about the drawing of his father, about Jake's face when Dakota told her story. He pulled the journal out from its hiding place under his blanket, opened it, looked at the drawing again. His father's face, Jake's hands, the blood. Kai made a decision. He walked over to where Jake was sitting in his chair. The man's eyes were closed, but Kai knew he wasn't really asleep. Jake never slept. "Jake," Kai said quietly. Jake's eyes opened. He looked at the youth, at the journal in his hands. "I find this," Kai said in careful English. "Under bed, I see picture." He held up the journal and pointed to the drawing. "That my father," Kai continued. "You try save him." Jake sat up slowly. "Yes." "Why you not tell me?" "Because I was ashamed." Kai thought about that. "My mother say you forgive. She say my father forgive too. I don't know if that's true." Kai sat down on the floor beside Jake's chair. He set the journal aside and looked up at Jake's face. "I forgive too," he said. Jake's eyes went wet. "You try," Kai said. "That enough. You come back. You save me. You good man." "I'm not." "Yes, you are." Kai reached out and took Jake's hand, held it, and for the first time in 16 years, Jake let himself cry. When Asha woke up an hour later, she found them like that. Jake in the chair, Kai sitting beside him holding his hand, both of them peaceful. She didn't wake them. She just stood there and watched. and something inside her, something that had been frozen for a long time, started to thaw. The storm finally broke on the 7th day. Jake stepped outside to find the world transformed. The snow had stopped. The sun was out. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at. He checked on Flint, broke the ice in the trough, and was splitting wood when he heard the sound of a wagon coming up the trail. His hand went to the rifle, leaning against the cabin wall. He waited. The wagon came around the bend, a single horse pulling it, a woman on the seat. Jake relaxed. He knew that wagon. Elena Cortez pulled up and climbed down. She was a sturdy woman in her early 40s, with dark hair going gray at the temples and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She ran the general store in Prescott, 20 miles south. Once a month she made deliveries to the ranches too far out for regular supply runs. She'd been making deliveries to Jake for 6 years. "Morning, Elena," Jake said. "Morning." She started unloading crates from the wagon. "Brought your flour, sugar, coffee, some salt pork, and the mail, though there's not much." "Appreciate it." Elena paused. She was looking past him, at the cabin, at the smoke coming from the chimney, at the clothes hanging outside to dry, women's clothes. "You got company," she said. "I do." "How many?" "4, 3 women and a boy." Elena's eyebrows went up. "Apache?" "Yes." She set down the crate she was holding. "Jake, do you know what you're doing? Helping people?" "You know that's not how folks will see it." "I don't care how folks see it." Elena studied his face. Then she sighed. "All right, it's your business, but I need to tell you something." "What?" "There's a man in Prescott, came in 3 days ago, name's Raymond Garrett. Says he's a bounty hunter. He's looking for 3 Apache women and a boy. Says they're wanted for aiding enemies of the United States Army." Jake's jaw tightened. "That's not true." "Maybe not, but he's got papers, or says he does. And he's asking questions, showing a drawing around. Someone's going to talk eventually." "How long do I have?" "A week. Maybe less if the weather stays clear." Jake nodded. "Thanks for the warning." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "You care about them. They needed help." "That's not what I asked." Jake didn't answer. Elena smiled sadly. "You always were too decent for your own good." She climbed back onto the wagon, but before she left she turned back. "Be careful, Jake," she said. "Men like Garrett don't stop just because you ask nicely." "I know." She drove away. Jake carried the supplies inside. Asha was at the stove making breakfast. She looked up when he entered. "Who was that?" "Elena. She runs the general store, makes deliveries." "Did she see us?" "She knows you're here." Asha's face went tight. "Will she tell anyone?" "No. Elena's good people, but there's something you need to know." He told her about Garrett. Asha sat down slowly. Her hand went to her stomach. "He found us." "Not yet, but he will." "Then we need to leave." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere far from here." Jake shook his head. "You're 6 months pregnant. It's the middle of winter. You won't make it 50 miles. "Then what do you suggest?" "Stay. Let me handle this." Sarah stepped forward. "Why would you do that? This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." "Why?" Jake looked at Asha. "Because walking away now would be the same as leaving Maka behind. I'm not making that mistake again." That afternoon, while Kai was resting and Dakota was mending clothes, Jake sat with Asha and Sarah at the table. "I need to know exactly what happened," he said. "Why is Garrett looking for you?" Asha glanced at Sarah. Sarah nodded. "After Brennan," Asha began quietly, "I couldn't stay at Fort Apache, so I went back to my people. But they'd heard I was translating for the Army. They thought I was a spy, a traitor." "Were you?" "No, I translated meetings, that's all. I never gave them information they didn't already know." "But someone used your translations." Asha nodded. "There was a raid on a small Apache camp. 20 people killed, including children. The Army said they got the location from intelligence gathered at Fort Apache, from my translations." "But you didn't tell them where the camp was." "I didn't even know where it was. But my people didn't believe me. They wanted justice. So they attacked a supply wagon. Killed 2 soldiers. And Garrett's here because one of those soldiers was his brother, Sarah said. Thomas Garrett, private, 22 years old. Jake closed his eyes. The Army put out a warrant for the women who planned the attack, Asha continued. They think it was us. It wasn't. We weren't even there. But someone told them we were. Who? I don't know. Someone who wanted us dead. Jake leaned back in his chair. So Garrett's not just looking for bounty money, he's looking for revenge. Yes. That makes it worse. I know. They sat in silence for a while. Then Jake stood up. I need to go into town, he said. Talk to the sheriff. See if I can buy you some time. That's dangerous, Sarah said. Everything's dangerous now. He saddled Flint and rode out before anyone could argue. The ride to Prescott took 3 hours. The town was small, 1 main street. A dozen buildings. The sheriff's office was at the far end next to the jail. Jake tied Flint outside and walked in. Sheriff Tom Hendricks was at his desk reading a newspaper. He looked up when Jake entered. Thornfield, he said. Don't see you much in winter. Got business? What kind? Heard there's a bounty hunter in town, Raymond Garrett. Hendricks' face went neutral. What about him? He's looking for some people who are staying with me. Apache, yes. They wanted. Garrett says they are. I say they're not. Hendricks set down the paper. You got proof. Just my word. That's not going to hold up if he's got papers. I know. That's why I'm here. I need you to ask him to show those papers. Verify they're real. And if they are, then I'll deal with it. But if they're not, I want him arrested for harassment. Hendricks studied Jake for a long moment. You're putting yourself in the middle of something ugly here. I know. Why, because it's the right thing to do. Hendricks sighed. I'll ask to see the papers, but that's all I can do. If they're legitimate, I have to honor them. Fair enough. Jake turned to leave, but Hendricks called him back. Thornfield, that woman translator, Nashota, she's one of them. Jake hesitated, then nodded. I heard what happened to her, Hendricks said. At Fort Apache with Brennan. It's not on any official record, but word gets around. Jake's hands clenched. I'm just saying. Hendricks continued. If you're protecting her because of that, I understand. But it won't matter to Garrett. And it won't matter to a judge. I know. Be careful. Jake rode back to the ranch. He was a mile from home when he saw the riders. 3 of them. Sitting on their horses at the top of a ridge silhouetted against the setting sun, watching his cabin. Jake's hand went to his rifle. One of the riders saw him and turned. Even from a distance, Jake could see the man's face. Hard, weathered, angry. Raymond Garrett. Garrett nudged his horse forward. His 2 men followed. They rode down the ridge and stopped 50 feet from Jake. Garrett was a big man, 6 feet tall, broad in the shoulders. He had a thick beard and cold eyes. A Colt revolver hung at his hip. A Winchester rifle rested across his saddle. You Thornfield? He asked. I am. I'm looking for 3 Apache women and a boy. Heard they might be staying with you. Who'd you hear that from? Garrett smiled. It wasn't friendly. That's not your concern. If you're on my land, it is. I've got a warrant for their arrest. I'm within my rights. Show me the warrant. Garrett's smile faded. I don't answer to you. You want to take someone off my property, you show me the papers. That's the law. One of Garrett's men, a skinny kid with a patchy beard, spoke up. We don't need to show you nothing. Jake ignored him, kept his eyes on Garrett. You knew my brother, Garrett said. Thomas Garrett, Canyon de Chelly, 1866. Jake's blood went cold. You were there, Garrett continued. Scout Morrison, or Thornfield as you call yourself now. I looked you up after I heard your name, found your service record, saw you were dishonorably discharged a month after Canyon de Chelly. That's ancient history. Not to me. My brother died because you people couldn't finish what you started, left Apaches alive who came back and killed him 6 months later. That's not what happened. Isn't it? You had a chance to wipe them out, but you went soft, started protecting them instead of killing them, got yourself kicked out for insubordination, and my brother paid the price. Jake's voice went hard. Your brother died because the Army sent boys to fight a war they didn't understand. Don't put that on me. Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. You're protecting them right now. Aren't you the same animals who killed Thomas? They're not animals. They're people, and they didn't kill anyone. The warrant says different. Then show me the warrant. Garrett stared at him. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, tossed it to Jake. Jake caught it, unfolded it, read it. It was a warrant, but it was vague. Described 3 Apache women, ages unknown, wanted for conspiracy to commit murder against United States soldiers. No names, no specific descriptions. It could have been anyone. This doesn't prove anything, Jake said. It proves I have legal authority to search for them. Not on private land without a sheriff present. Garrett's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I'll be back with the sheriff. And when I am, you won't be able to stop me. We'll see. Garrett turned his horse. His men followed. But before they rode away, Garrett looked back. We fought together once, he said, at Canyon de Chelly. I remember you, Morrison. You were a good soldier. Until you weren't. I don't know what happened to you, but the man you used to be would understand what I'm doing. The man I used to be is dead, Jake said. And good riddance. Garrett rode away. Jake sat on Flint and watched them go. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. He'd just made an enemy, a dangerous one. But he'd meant every word. When he got back to the cabin, Asha was waiting outside. I saw them, she said. Who were they? Garrett and his men. What did he want? You. Asha's face went pale. What did you tell him? To come back with the sheriff if he wants to search my property. Jake, he'll kill you. Maybe. But he won't touch you. Not while I'm breathing. Asha stared at him. Why are you doing this? I already told you. Tell me again. Jake dismounted, stood in front of her, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Because for 16 years I've been running from my mistakes, he said. Hiding out here, punishing myself, thinking if I stayed alone long enough it would somehow make up for the people I failed. He took a breath. But it doesn't work that way. The only way to make up for the past is to do better in the present. And right now, in this moment, the right thing to do is protect you. So that's what I'm going to do. Asha's eyes were wet. You could die. We all die eventually. That's not funny. I'm not joking. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm despite the cold. If you do this, she said, if you fight for us, it changes things. Between us. You understand that? I know. I can't promise you anything. I don't know what I can give. I'm still broken, still angry, still carrying this child I don't want. I'm not asking for promises. Then what are you asking for? Jake looked at her hand in his. Just a chance to do the right thing, to be better than I was. Asha squeezed his hand. Then we fight, she said. That evening, as the sun went down and the temperature dropped, Elena's wagon appeared again on the trail. Jake walked out to meet her. Back so soon? He asked. Elena climbed down. Her face was serious. I went to the sheriff after I left here, asked him about Garrett's warrant. And it's real, or real enough. Signed by a judge in Tucson, but it's vague. Doesn't name names. Doesn't give specific crimes. Just says 3 Apache women wanted in connection with the deaths of 2 soldiers. So it's garbage. Legally, no. It gives Garrett authority to search, to question, to arrest if he thinks he's found the right people. Jake swore under his breath. But, Elena continued, Sheriff Hendricks is a good man. He's going to insist on being present when Garrett comes back. He'll make sure everything's done by the book. That'll buy you some time. How much? A day, maybe 2. That's not enough. I know, but it's all I can give you. She looked at him, really looked at him, like she was trying to memorize his face. I need to tell you something, she said, before this goes any further. What? Elena took a breath. I've loved you for 6 years, Jake. Since the day I found you drunk in the mud behind the saloon crying about Eliza and the baby. I cleaned you up, brought you home, sat with you while you sobbed. Jake opened his mouth. Elena held up a hand. Let me finish. I loved you then. I love you now. I know you've never looked at me that way. I know I'm not what you want, but I need you to know before whatever happens next. Elena? I see how you look at her, Elena continued. That Apache woman, Asha. You look at her the way you used to look at Eliza, like she's the only thing in the world that matters. And I'm happy for you, I am. Because you deserve to feel that again. Her voice broke. But it hurts, she whispered, watching you risk everything for her, knowing you'd never do the same for me. Jake stepped forward. He took Elena's hands. You're right, he said. I never looked at you that way. And I'm sorry. You deserved better than that. You deserved someone who could love you back. But you can't. No, I can't. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. You saved my life, multiple times, and I'll never forget that. Elena smiled through her tears. I know. That's why I'm going to help you. You don't have to. Yes, I do, because even if you don't love me, you're still the best man I know, and she needs you, so I'm going to make sure you survive this. She squeezed his hands, then let go. When Garrett comes back, she said, I'll be there. I'll testify that the women have been helping you, that they're peaceful, that they're not a threat. It might not stop him, but it might slow him down. Elena, if you do that, you could lose everything, your business, your reputation. I know, but some things are more important than money. She climbed back onto the wagon. Be safe, Jake, she said. Then she drove away. Jake stood there in the cold watching her go. Inside the cabin, Asha was at the window. She'd seen everything. When Jake came back inside, she didn't say anything, just looked at him with dark, knowing eyes. She loves you, Asha said. I know. And you don't love her back. No? Why not? She's good. She's kind. She'd give you a peaceful life. Jake walked over to where Asha stood, stopped close enough that he could smell the wood smoke in her hair. Because peace isn't what I need, he said, and she's not who I want. Asha's breath caught. I want someone who understands what it's like to carry the weight of the past. Jake continued. Someone who's been broken and put themselves back together with their own hands. Someone who fights even when they're terrified. Someone who reads Milton by firelight and makes a handful of beans feed 5 people and protects a child who isn't even hers yet. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. I want you, he said simply. Asha's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I can give you what you want. I'm not asking you to, I'm just telling you the truth. She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his chest, and for the first time since they'd met, she let herself be held without fear. Outside, the wind picked up. Snow started to fall again, and somewhere out there in the dark, Raymond Garrett was planning his return. But for this one moment in this small cabin, 2 broken people found something worth fighting for. Each other. 3 days passed, 3 days of preparation. Jake taught Asha and Sarah how to shoot. Not well, but well enough. He showed them how to load the rifle, how to brace it against their shoulders, how to breathe steady and squeeze the trigger instead of pulling. Asha was a quick learner. Her first shot went wide, but her second hit the tree she was aiming for. By the end of the day, she could hit a target at 30 yards. Sarah was better. She had a hunter's eye, steady hands. She didn't flinch when the gun kicked. You've done this before, Jake said. My father taught me, Sarah replied, before the soldiers killed him. They fortified the cabin as best they could. Jake boarded up one window, left the others clear for shooting positions. He moved the heavy furniture against the walls to create cover. Stockpiled ammunition, filled every container they had with water. Dakota helped by keeping Kai occupied. She told him stories, taught him songs, kept him away from the guns and the fear in the adults' eyes. But Kai knew something was wrong. He watched everything, asked questions Jake couldn't answer. Bad men coming, Kai asked on the second day. Jake knelt down to his level. Maybe. You stop them. I'll try. I help. Jake put his hand on the youth's shoulder. You help by staying safe, by listening to your mother, by being brave. Can you do that? Kai nodded seriously. I be brave. On the third evening, as the sun was setting, Asha found Jake outside. He was splitting wood, even though they had plenty. He needed to do something with his hands. You should rest, she said. Can't. When did you last sleep? Jake drove the axe into the chopping block. I don't remember. Asha stepped closer. The light was fading. Her face was half in shadow. Are you afraid? She asked. Yes. Me too. Jake looked at her. Really looked at her. The curve of her cheek, the strength in her eyes, the way she held herself even though she was tired and scared and 6 months pregnant. If something happens to me, he said, don't. If something happens, there's money hidden under the floorboard in the northwest corner. $300. It's yours. Take it and go as far as you can. Jake, promise me. Asha's jaw tightened. I'm not leaving you behind. You might not have a choice. Then I'll make one. She reached up and touched his face. Her hand was warm against his cold skin. We fight together, she said, or we don't fight at all. Then she kissed him. It wasn't soft or gentle. It was desperate, fierce, like she was trying to hold on to something solid in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. Jake kissed her back. His hands found her waist, pulled her closer. For a moment there was nothing but the taste of her mouth and the feel of her body against his and the knowledge that this might be the last time. When they finally broke apart, Asha was breathing hard. I don't know what happens after this, she said. I don't know if we survive. But I need you to know that you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hope. That night they lay together under the blankets, not making love, just holding each other, finding comfort in warmth and closeness and the simple fact of not being alone. Jake didn't sleep, but he rested, and that was enough. The next morning everything changed. Jake was outside checking the perimeter when he heard a horse coming up the trail, single rider, moving fast. His hand went to his gun, but it wasn't Garrett. It was a soldier, U.S. Army Cavalry, blue uniform, officer's insignia. The man rode into the yard and dismounted. He was tall, lean, about 35. He had a sharp face and cold eyes. Jake knew those eyes. Sergeant Lucas Brennan, Jake said quietly. The man smiled. Not sergeant anymore. Lieutenant now, and it's been a long time, Morrison. Thornfield. Right. New name, new life, but same old habits, I hear. Still protecting Indians who don't deserve it. Jake's hand stayed near his gun. What do you want? I'm looking for someone. An Apache woman named Nashota. Goes by Asha. I heard she might be staying with you. And if she is, Brennan's smile faded. Then I have business with her. She's carrying my child. I have rights. Jake felt rage flood through him, hot and sharp and dangerous. You don't have any rights, he said. Not after what you did. What I did? Brennan laughed. We had relations, consensual relations. The Army investigated and found no wrongdoing. Because you threatened her. Because you're an officer, and she was nobody. Careful, Morrison. You're talking about a superior officer. You're not my superior. I left the Army. And you're not an officer. You're a rapist. Brennan's hand moved toward his sidearm. That's slander. It's the truth. The cabin door opened. Asha stepped out. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Get off this land, she said. You're not welcome here. Brennan's eyes lit up. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. I know. That's why I ran. You can't run from this. That's my child you're carrying. My blood. I have a legal claim. Asha's hand went to her stomach. You have nothing. You're a monster. And I'll die before I let you near this baby. Brennan took a step forward. Jake moved between them. You need to leave, Jake said. Now. Or what you'll shoot me. A decorated Army officer, they'll hang you for that. Maybe. But you'll still be dead. Brennan studied Jake's face. Then he smiled again. I remember you now, he said. Canyon de Chelly. You were the one who went soft, started crying over wounded savages, got yourself kicked out for refusing to follow orders. I got kicked out for having a conscience. Same thing. Brennan looked past Jake at Asha. I'll be back. with papers, legal papers, that say that child is mine. And when I come back, neither you nor this has-been soldier is going to stop me." He mounted his horse. "Oh, and Morrison Raymond Garrett says hello. We've been comparing notes. Seems we both have scores to settle with you and your Apache friends. We'll be visiting soon. Together." He rode away. Jake turned to Asha. She was shaking. "He's going to come back," she said. "I know. With Garrett. I know. We can't fight them both." Jake took her hands. "Then we get help." "From who?" "Elena, the sheriff. Anyone who'll listen." But before he could say more, Sarah came running from the cabin. "Riders," she said. "Coming from the north. 5 of them." Jake's stomach dropped. It was too soon. Garrett wasn't supposed to be back yet, but when he looked at the ridge, there they were. 5 men on horseback, moving slow, taking their time. "Get inside," Jake said. "All of you, now." They didn't argue. Jake grabbed his rifle and took position behind the water trough. It wouldn't stop bullets, but it was better than nothing. The riders came down the slope and stopped 50 feet from the cabin. Garrett was in the lead. Brennan was beside him. 3 other men Jake didn't recognize flanked them. "Thornfield," Garrett called out. "We're done talking. Send out the women, or we come in and get them. You don't have the authority. I've got the sheriff's approval to search the premises, and Lieutenant Brennan here has a legal claim to the child that woman's carrying. So, yes, we have the authority." "Show me the papers." Garrett pulled out a document and held it up. Even from a distance, Jake could see the official seal. His heart sank. "You've got 2 minutes, Garrett said. "Then we're coming in." Jake's mind raced. He couldn't fight 5 men. Even with Asha and Sarah helping, they'd be outnumbered and outgunned. He needed time. "All right," Jake called out. "Give me 5 minutes to talk to them. Let them gather their things." Garrett considered. 3 minutes. Not a second more. Jake ran back to the cabin. Inside, everyone was waiting. Dakota held Kai close. Sarah had her knife out. Asha stood by the window rifle in her hands. "They have papers," Jake said. "Legal ones. I can't stop them without starting a war." "Then we fight," Sarah said. "We'll lose." "Maybe. But we go down fighting." Jake looked at Asha. Her face was set, determined. "No," she said. "No one dies for me today. Asha, I'll go with them. I'll figure something out. But I won't let you die. That's not happening. It's my choice. And I'm not letting you make it." They stared at each other. The air between them crackled with desperation and fear and something else. Something that hadn't been named yet, but was there all the same. Then Kai spoke up. "I have idea," he said in his fluent English. Everyone turned to look at him. "What idea?" Jake asked. "You teach me trap, for rabbit. I make trap, for bad men." Jake looked at the youth. "Kai, this is different. These aren't rabbits." "I know, but trap still work." Out of the mouths of youth. Jake looked at the boy's serious face, at the intelligence in his eyes, at the determination that reminded him so much of Asha. "What do you need?" Jake asked. Kai told him. 2 minutes later, Jake walked back outside. Garrett was getting impatient. "Time's up," Garrett said. "They're coming," Jake replied. "Just give me 1 more minute." "I gave you 3. That's all you get." Garrett dismounted. So did Brennan and the other 3 men. They started walking toward the cabin. That's when Kai's trap sprung. The youth had positioned a rope stretched across the path, hidden under a thin layer of snow. When Garrett stepped on it, the rope pulled tight. A heavy branch that Kai had bent and tied came whipping down. It caught Garrett across the chest and knocked him flat on his back. His men stopped confused. Jake used the distraction. He raised his rifle and fired a shot over their heads. "Next one goes lower," he shouted. Garrett struggled to his feet, gasping for air. His face was purple with rage. "You're dead," he snarled. "All of you." He drew his gun. Jake aimed at his chest. But before either of them could fire, Sarah came running out of the cabin. She had a pistol in her hand and murder in her eyes. "Sarah, no!" Asha screamed. Sarah ignored her. She ran straight at Garrett's men, firing wildly. One of them went down, shot in the leg. The others scattered. Garrett turned his gun towards Sarah. That's when Dakota appeared. She came out of nowhere, moving faster than Jake had ever seen her move. She threw herself between Garrett and Sarah just as he pulled the trigger. The bullet hit her in the chest. Dakota stumbled, fell. Kai screamed. Asha screamed. Time seemed to stop. Jake fired. His bullet caught Garrett in the shoulder and spun him around. The man went down hard. Sarah fired again. Hit another one of Garrett's men. Brennan turned and ran, mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. The remaining men followed him. In seconds, they were gone. Jake ran to Dakota. She was lying in the snow, blood spreading across her chest. Her breathing was shallow and wet. Asha dropped to her knees beside her. Kai threw himself down next to his mother. "Sister," Asha choked out. "Why?" Dakota's eyes were clear, peaceful. She reached up and touched Kai's face. "My son," she whispered in Apache. Then in English, "You are safe now." She looked at Asha. "Love the baby. Promise me." "I promise," Asha sobbed. "I promise." Dakota's eyes found Jake. "Thank you for trying to save him, for trying to save us." "You're going to be okay," Jake said. His hands were on the wound trying to stop the bleeding, but there was too much, too fast. "No," Dakota said softly, "but that's all right. I've been ready for a long time. I stayed for Kai. Now he has you, both of you." Her breathing slowed. "Tell him," she whispered, "tell him his father was brave, even if he wasn't. Tell him that." "I will," Jake said. Dakota smiled. Her hand fell away from Kai's face, and then she was gone. Kai's sobs were the only sound in the world. They buried Dakota on the hill overlooking the ranch, the same hill where Jake had buried Eliza and their son 6 years before. Sarah dug the grave. She wouldn't let anyone help. She just dug and dug until the hole was deep enough. They wrapped Dakota in blankets, laid her in the ground, spoke words that felt too small for the loss. Asha cut her hair, a mourning ritual. She let the dark strands fall into the grave. Kai placed his father's necklace on his mother's chest, the bone hawk carving, the last piece of maca he had. "Together now," the youth said. "Mother and father together." Jake filled in the grave. When it was done, he carved Dakota's name into a piece of wood and placed it at the head. They stood there for a long time, not speaking, just being. Then they went back to the cabin. Garrett's body was still in the yard. Sarah and Jake dragged it away from the house. They'd bury him later, or let the wolves have him. Jake didn't much care which. The wounded man Garrett had left behind died before morning. They buried him too. No marker, no words. Sheriff Hendricks came the next day with Elena. They'd heard the shooting from town. Jake told them everything, about Garrett, about Brennan, about Dakota's sacrifice. Hendricks examined the scene, looked at the graves, talked to Asha and Sarah. "Self-defense," he said finally, "clear as day. Garrett drew first. You have witnesses. The Army's not going to like that one of their officers ran away, but that's their problem, not yours." "What about Brennan?" Jake asked. "What about him?" "He's going to come back." Hendricks shook his head. "No, he's not." "How do you know?" Elena spoke up. "Because while you were dealing with Garrett, I was talking to some of the women who worked at Fort Apache. Got them to tell me about Brennan, about what he'd done, not just to Asha, to others." She pulled out a stack of papers, written statements, signed and dated. "I took these to the Army commander in Tucson," she continued, "along with a letter from me and 3 other business owners saying we wouldn't work with the Army anymore if Brennan remained in service." "What did they do?" Asha asked. "They arrested him. Court-martial hearing is next week. He's going to prison for a long time." Asha's knees buckled. Jake caught her. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over," Elena said. Asha started to cry. Not sad tears, relief tears. The kind that come when you've been holding your breath for so long you've forgotten how to breathe normally. Sarah put her arms around both of them. The 3 of them stood there holding each other up. Hendricks cleared his throat. "I'll file the report as self-defense, but you should know there might be questions. people talking. You're harboring Apache women at a time when tensions are high." "I'm not harboring anyone," Jake said. "They're my family." Hendricks nodded slowly. "All right then, your family." He and Elena left. Winter ended slowly. The snow melted in patches, revealed dead grass and mud, and the promise of green underneath. The days grew longer, warmer. Birds came back. The creek that had been frozen solid started to run again. Inside the cabin, life continued. Asha's belly grew larger. The baby moved constantly now, kicked and rolled, and made its presence known. At first, Asha still flinched when she felt it, still had moments where she looked at her stomach with something like hatred. But then Kai would put his hand on her belly and smile when the baby kicked, or Sarah would talk to the baby like it could already hear, or Jake would read aloud at night, and the baby would settle as if listening. Slowly, so slowly, Asha almost didn't notice the hatred became something else. Not love, not yet, but acceptance. The baby wasn't the enemy, it was just a child, an innocent, like Kai had been, like every child was. 2 months after Dakota's death, on a warm afternoon in early spring, Asha's water broke. Sarah had helped with births before. She knew what to do. Boil water, get clean cloth, keep Asha calm. Jake took Kai outside. They sat on the porch and waited. The labor lasted 6 hours. Jake heard every scream, every cry, every moment of pain. He wanted to go inside, wanted to help, but Sarah had been firm. Men had no place in a birthing room. So he waited. Kai sat beside him. The youth didn't sleep, just watched the door with worried eyes. The sun set. The stars came out. And then finally he heard it. A baby crying. Jake's heart stopped. The door opened. Sarah stepped out. She was smiling. "A girl," she said. "Healthy, strong lungs. And Asha, tired but fine." Jake stood up. Kai jumped to his feet. They walked inside together. Asha was propped up against pillows. Her hair was damp with sweat. Her face was pale, but she was smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle, a baby with dark hair and skin that was somewhere between Asha's brown and Brennan's white. "She's beautiful," Jake said. Asha looked down at the baby, really looked at her, at the small fingers, the perfect nose, the way her eyes scrunched shut when she cried. "I thought I'd hate her," Asha whispered. "I was so sure I would, but I don't." "What do you feel?" Asha's eyes filled with tears. "I feel like maybe Dakota was right. Maybe I can love her. Maybe I can love something that came from pain and still see it as good." She looked up at Jake. "Will you hold her?" Jake hesitated. "I don't know how." "Neither do I. We'll learn together." He sat down on the bed. Asha placed the baby in his arms. She was so small, so light. She fit perfectly in the crook of his elbow. The baby opened her eyes, dark eyes, looking up at him like she knew him. "What will you name her?" Jake asked. Asha didn't hesitate. "Dakota, after the woman who saved her, who saved all of us." Jake's throat tightened. She'd like that. They sat there for a long time, the four of them, a family born from loss and pain and the simple choice to stay. 2 weeks later, Elena came to visit. She brought supplies, food, clothes for the baby, a carved wooden cradle that her father had made years ago. She also brought news. "Brennan's trial is over," she said. 20 years hard labor. He'll die in prison." Asha closed her eyes. "Good. And I have something else." Elena pulled out an envelope. "A letter from the Army, an official apology for what happened to you, and a commendation for your service as a translator. It's not much, but it's something." Asha took the letter, read it, then set it aside. "Thank you," she said. "But I don't need their apology. I know what happened, and I know I survived it. That's enough." Elena smiled. "You're stronger than most people I know." "I had help." Asha looked at Jake, at Sarah, at Kai holding baby Dakota. "I had family." A month later, on a warm May morning, Jake hitched the wagon and drove Asha and the children into town. They went to the small church at the edge of Prescott, the one with the wooden cross and the kind pastor who didn't ask too many questions. Sheriff Hendricks was there. Elena was there. Sarah was there. A handful of townspeople who'd gotten to know Jake over the years. The pastor stood at the front. Jake and Asha stood before him. "Do you, Jacob Thornfield, take this woman to be your wife?" the pastor asked. "I do," Jake said. "I'll protect her and her children with my life." "Do you, Nashota Whitehawk, take this man to be your husband?" Asha looked at Jake, at the man who'd saved her son, who'd fought for her, who'd stood between her and everyone who wanted to hurt her. "I do," she said. "He's already proven himself." The pastor smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Jake leaned down and kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise. Kai cheered. Baby Dakota gurgled. Sarah smiled. Elena cried happy tears. They were a family now, official and real and unbreakable. That evening they returned to the ranch, their home. Jake built a fire in the yard, not for warmth, for ceremony. He brought out his old Army journal, the one with the drawings, the one with Maka's face, the one he'd been carrying for 16 years. Asha brought out the piece of hair she'd cut when Dakota died, the mourning cloth she'd worn, the symbols of grief and pain. Together they stood by the fire. "We can't change what happened," Jake said. "Can't bring back the people we lost. Can't undo the pain. But we can choose what we carry forward," Asha continued, "and what we leave behind." They threw the journal into the flames, watched the pages curl and burn, watched the drawings of war and death and loss turn to ash. Asha threw in the mourning cloth, the hair, the symbols of everything that had broken them. The fire consumed it all. When the flames died down, they walked to the garden plot Sarah had been tending. Jake had brought something from town, a small apple tree, just a sapling, barely 3 feet tall. Together they dug a hole. Kai helped. Sarah helped. Even baby Dakota watched from Asha's arms. They planted the tree in good soil, watered it, packed the earth around its roots. "For new beginnings," Jake said. "For growth," Asha added. "For family," Sarah said. "For home," Kai finished. They stood there as the sun set. 5 people, scarred and broken and healing, building something new from the ashes of what came before. Jake looked at Asha, at the baby in her arms, at Kai standing beside him, at Sarah standing strong beside them. This was his family now, not the one he was born into, not the one he'd lost, but the one he'd chosen, and that made all the difference. Years later, when people asked how it happened, how a white rancher ended up with an Apache wife and children, Jake would always give the same answer. "I found a boy in the snow," he'd say, "and I decided to do the right thing. Everything else followed from that." It was the truth, simple and complete, because sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest choices, from the decision to save one life, to offer shelter to strangers, to fight for what's right even when it's hard. The apple tree grew tall over the years, strong and fruitful. Its branches spread wide, its roots went deep, and under its shade a family thrived. Kai grew up to be a translator like his aunt, but he used his skills to build bridges between his 2 worlds, to help others find the peace he'd found. Baby Takeda became a teacher. She taught children of all colors and backgrounds, taught them to read and write and think for themselves. Sarah opened a trading post, the first one run by an Apache woman. It became a gathering place, a neutral ground where all were welcome. Jake and Asha lived to old age. They buried their pain and grew their love. They raised children and grandchildren. They built a legacy of courage and compassion. And every spring when the snow melted and the world turned green again, they would stand together under the apple tree and remember. Remember the winter they met, the pain they endured, the family they became. Remember Dakota, who gave her life so others could live. Remember Maka, who died too young but whose son grew up strong. Remember Eliza and the baby who never breathed, whose loss made room for new love. Remember all the ghosts, all the grief, all the guilt, and then let it go, because the past was finished, but the future was growing, like the tree, like the children, like love itself. Roots deep enough to survive any storm, branches strong enough to shelter generations, fruit sweet enough to make the bitter winters worth enduring. This was their legacy. This was their home. This was blood and snow transformed into something beautiful. And it all began with one choice: to stay, to fight, to love. The end.